Welcome back to my channel. There is a moment buried in Season 6 of Sister Wives that still sends a chill through the spine of this family's legacy, a moment darker than the catfishing scandal, deeper than the infamous knife in the kidneys, and far more revealing than the eventual collapse of the original marriages. It was a moment wrapped in soft music, emotional narration, and TLC's trademark warm lighting, but underneath all of that was something far more unsettling. It was the moment Robin Brown handed Cody a custom portrait. At first glance, it looked sentimental, even sweet. But when you strip away the edits, the music, the tears, you're left with something deeply psychological. This wasn't just a painting. This was a reconstruction of reality. In the portrait, Cody Brown stands young and glowing, holding 3 babies, Dayton, Aurora, and Brianna. But here's the truth. Cody Brown never held those children as babies. He didn't know them. He wasn't their father. He wasn't there. Robin took a real photo, one with Christine's children, erased Christine's biological legacy, and pasted her own children on top of them. Then she looked at her husband and said the line that has echoed for years. I created a moment that didn't exist. That wasn't just a strange gift. It was the first visible crack in a much larger, far more disturbing pattern. A campaign to erase a man named David Jessup, the real father of those children, and rewrite history so that Cody Brown became the only father figure who mattered. Before we peel back the layers of this psychological thriller, before we reveal the insider information TLC never wanted viewers to connect, make sure you're subscribed and hit that like button. You do not want to miss what we discovered about the real timeline of the Brown family adoption saga. Because to understand why this portrait is the most important symbol in the show's entire history, you have to understand the psychology behind it. Experts call this revisionist history, a tactic used by narcissists and manipulators to reshape the past so it better serves their emotional needs today. When Robin commissioned that sketch, she wasn't creating a gift. She was creating a correction, a rewrite, a new origin story. She was soothing Cody's deepest insecurity, that his so-called soulmate had belonged to someone else first. Cody Brown is a man obsessed with loyalty, hierarchy, and possession. And nothing injures a narcissistic ego more than the reminder that he was not the first man, the only man, or the chosen man. So what does Robin do? She doesn't just ask him to accept her past, she attempts to erase it. And here's where it gets darker. The source image for that portrait was a real photo of Cody with Christine's children. Let that sink in. To elevate her children to the top of Cody's emotional pyramid, Robin literally pasted them over the children who were actually there. She cannibalized Christine's memory to feed her fantasy. When the portrait was revealed, the camera didn't need dialogue. You could feel the tension coming off the other wives. It wasn't awkward. It was eerie. It was the moment they all realized they were no longer looking at a family portrait. They were looking at a lie, framed, matted, and proudly presented. Robin's voiceover made it worse. She talked about wishing she had met Cody younger, wishing he had been her children's father from day one. It sounded sweet on the surface, but in practice, it rejected her children's real identity. Because Dayton, Aurora, and Brianna have a father. His name is David Jessup. And by the time Robin commissioned that portrait, those kids were old enough to remember who held them when they were babies. So, who was this portrait really for? Not the kids. It was for Cody. It allowed him to pretend he was the beginning and the end, the alpha, the omega, the eternal father of every child under his roof. It let him erase the reality that another man came before him. And this ties directly into Robin's infamous purity speech, the one where she called her first marriage a mistake, where she presented her past as a tragedy that needed to be repaired. That portrait was the repair, the fix, the visual proof that she had corrected her history for him. It was her way of saying, "Look, Cody, I fixed it. I made the past align with the version of reality you need." What comes next in this story is the part viewers still struggle to fully wrap their heads around. Because when Robin looked at Cody, proudly holding that portrait, she didn't just say something emotional or sentimental. She said words that, in hindsight, feel like the thesis statement of her entire relationship with him. I erased him. You were always there. That line wasn't romantic. It wasn't sweet. It was a declaration of psychological warfare. This went far beyond reality TV dramatics. It crossed into the territory experts call the psychological eraser, a calculated attempt to overwrite someone's identity, someone's history, and someone's place in the world. And the darkest part? It worked. Cody loved it. He didn't blink. He didn't say, "Robin, I wasn't there." He didn't question the ethics, the message, or the implications. He looked at that portrait and saw exactly what he craves more than anything: validation. He saw a world where he was the rescuer, the savior, the man who swooped in and saved 3 children not just from a broken home, but from their biology itself. Now here's where it gets even heavier. According to insiders deeply connected to the fundamentalist community, Cody's obsession with erasing David Jessup goes far beyond jealousy. This is about bloodlines, about status, about hierarchy in a religious ecosystem obsessed with lineage. Because David Jessup isn't some forgotten ex-husband. He's a Jessup. In the AUB and broader Mormon fundamentalist circles, the Jessup name is royalty, one of the most powerful, established clans in the entire movement. Robin wasn't married to some random man. She was tied to a dynasty. Leaving that marriage wasn't just leaving a partner. It was leaving a throne. And when she came to Cody Brown, a man always desperate to be seen as important, always fighting for spiritual clout, she introduced a strange, toxic dynamic. Cody has been competing with a ghost of David Jessup ever since. He must be richer. He must be more respected. He must be more loved. He must be the better father. That's why the adoption was pushed so aggressively. Being a stepfather wasn't enough. Being loving wasn't enough. Being present wasn't enough. Cody needed his name on those birth certificates. He needed to legally overwrite the Jessup name with the Brown name. This wasn't love. This was legacy engineering. But to make that rewrite believable, another narrative was needed, a powerful one, a convenient one. The abusive ex-husband story. From season 1, Robin is painted a haunting picture of her first marriage: alcoholism, abuse, fear, chaos. And let's be very clear, if abuse occurred, that is tragic and deserves compassion. But courts, documents, timelines, they all raise questions the show never allowed on camera. Because typically, when a father is as dangerous as Robin suggests, visitation is restricted or removed. Yet in those early seasons, the kids did visit their dad. They stayed with him. So, if he was the monster she describes, why did the courts allow it? Insiders believe the reality was likely complex, mutual, or far different from the pure victim-savior storyline TLC promoted. Because the Monster X narrative accomplishes 2 critical goals. Cody loves playing the rescuer. He loves the damsel in distress fantasy. He feels bigger, stronger, more important when protecting a woman from a villain. 2, it morally justifies the alienation. If David Jessup is evil, then cutting him off isn't cruelty. It's duty. It's righteous. It's necessary. Suddenly, erasing the biological father becomes an act of love, not manipulation. And we see this play out in the little moments TLC aired without context. The bike riding scenes. The yard play scenes. The quiet corrections. Call him dad. No, sweetie, he chose you. Your other family, they weren't really there. This is textbook parental alienation, a psychological strategy used to slowly reshape a child's perception of a parent until that child rejects them. The portrait was the artwork. The everyday language was the programming. Imagine the weight on those kids, being told their identity is dangerous, their biology is shameful, their real father is a mistake. And the only path to love, acceptance, and safety is to embrace Cody so fully that they must pretend he was there when they were in diapers. It creates a split inside the child, a rejection of their own origin. Which brings us to Dayton, the key to this entire puzzle. He is the oldest. He remembers the most. He had the clearest memory of the life before Cody. For years, TLC portrayed him as fully committed to the adoption, the name change, the Brown dynasty. But recent leaks, social media slips, and insider whispers tell a very different story. There are reports that Dayton has maintained contact with David Jessup, that he reached out, that he wanted connection, that he resisted complete erasure. Some believe his move to college, and later possibly to an RV outside the main house, wasn't about autism, rules, or independence. It was about escaping the suffocating loyalty tests inside the Brown kingdom. Because here's the dangerous truth. If Dayton still loves his biological father, if he still talks to him, if he still sees him, Cody's entire narrative collapses. Cody demands total loyalty. We've seen this with Garrison, with Gabriel, with Isabel, with Logan, with anyone who dared question him. So what happens when the son Cody saved still loves the man he was supposedly saved from? That's the tension bubbling beneath the surface of the later seasons. Because the portrait lie only works if everyone keeps playing pretend. But these kids are adults now. They can drive. They can call. They can ask the questions they weren't allowed to ask before. And when the name change ceremony happened, it wasn't performed like a legal technicality. It was a baptism, a rebranding, a spiritual ownership ritual. Cody Brown wasn't adopting children. He was claiming property. What happened in that courtroom, the moment those signatures dried, the instant the judge's gavel hit wood, wasn't a tender scene of blended family unity. It wasn't healing. It wasn't closure. It was conquest. When Cody Brown watched those adoption papers become official, his face didn't show relief or humility. It showed victory, triumph, the satisfaction of a man who believed he had finally defeated the ghost he'd been competing with for years, David Jessup. In that moment, Cody didn't gain children, he took them. He claimed them like trophies, like proof that he had won a battle no one else even realized he was fighting. But what Cody didn't understand, and what the universe is now serving back to him in brutal, poetic clarity, is that you cannot build a family on a lie. You cannot build trust on forced amnesia. You cannot demand children rewrite their own history without consequences. And those consequences are exactly what we're watching play out today. For over a decade, Cody obsessed over erasing an absent father. He shamed David Jessup for not being there. He used that narrative to elevate himself, to paint himself as the rescuer, the hero, the ever-present protector. But what has Cody Brown become? The most absent father in his own story. Look at the receipts. Isabel's spine surgery? He wasn't there. Gabriel's birthday. The day his son cried alone in his room? He wasn't there. Garrison's pleas for connection? He wasn't there. His grandchildren being born? Barely present. 3 wives and 12 children? Abandoned emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Cody projected every insecurity, every failing, every cowardice onto David Jessup. He accused David of not caring, not providing, being toxic. And then Cody lived out every one of those accusations himself. This is psychological projection in its purest form. Cody demonized David to avoid facing the truth about himself. And while Cody ranted on national television, while he weaponized the victim narrative, while he blamed, shamed, and deflected, do you know what David Jessup did? Nothing. He stayed silent. He stayed private. He didn't run to the tabloids. He didn't start a podcast. He didn't weaponize his kids. He didn't build a brand off bitterness. In the end, the man Cody called a monster turned out to be the quiet one, while Cody revealed his own toxicity to millions every season. The erase and replace strategy was never about the children. If the goal had been protecting the kids, things would have been different. They would have been allowed to keep pictures of their biological father. They would have been allowed to ask questions, to hold memories, to integrate their past with their present. But that didn't happen. Because this was never about the kids. This was about Robin and Cody. Robin needed a narrative where she was the triumphant survivor. Cody needed a narrative where he was the conquering hero. The portrait, the infamous portrait, wasn't art. It was a totem of delusion. A symbol of shared fantasy. A rewriting of history wrapped in romantic lighting. Why did the other wives stay silent? Here's the question most viewers overlook. Why didn't Christine or Janelle say anything? Why didn't anyone point out how creepy, how manipulative, how wrong it all was? Because by then, a culture of fear had already taken root. In that house, questioning Robin meant challenging Cody. And challenging Cody meant becoming the villain. If Christine or Janelle had spoken up, they would have been labeled jealous, bitter, unsafe, not supportive, not loyal, not spiritual enough. So they did what survivors in high-control families do. They swallowed the discomfort. They smiled through the manipulation. They played along with the lie because the cost of truth was too high. This is how authoritarian systems work. Everyone sees what's wrong. Everyone feels the tension. Everyone knows the emperor has no clothes, but no one dares whisper it aloud. In this case, everyone saw the portrait had the wrong faces, yet no one spoke a word. Now we enter the part of this story that almost no one talks about, the part buried under NDAs, sealed documents, and no comments from every adult involved. The emotional manipulation was one thing, but the financial angle? That's where the eraser becomes something far darker. Because behind the tears, behind the portrait, behind the TLC storyline of blended family unity, there was a shadow negotiation happening. Quiet, strategic, ruthless. And according to multiple insider reports, the adoption wasn't just about love, stability, or healing childhood wounds. It was about money, power, liability, and control. The financial motive behind the eraser for years, rumors have floated around fundamentalist circles and insider groups. The Browns weren't just erasing David Jessup emotionally, they were erasing him financially. There were two major theories. One, remove David's financial obligations. Once the adoption went through, David no longer owed child support. That meant the Browns could take full financial possession of the kids, for tax purposes, for insurance purposes, and most importantly, for TLC purposes. Every child is a storyline. Every storyline is a paycheck. And without a biological father attached, there's no one else with a legal claim to that revenue stream. 2. Block David from claiming any portion of the TLC income. If David were still a legal guardian, he could have had rights. Rights to object to filming, rights to demand protections, rights to challenge how his children were displayed. By clearing him out on paper, Cody didn't just become dad. He became owner, gatekeeper, and narrative controller. And you can see this control in the footage itself. The children performing the script when we rewatch the early seasons now, knowing what we know, the pain is impossible to miss. Look at Aurora. Look at Brianna. Their smiles are trembling. Their tears come on cue. Their affection toward Cody feels performed, not natural. They cling to him like survival, not love. Because in that house, being a Jessup wasn't just frowned upon. It was a sin. A stain. A mark they had to scrub off every day just to feel worthy. Robin and Cody didn't just ask those children to love a new father. They asked them to renounce their old one. They asked them to renounce their own origin story. The portrait was not the crime. It was the confession. That drawing moment isn't just creepy, it's revealing. It proves that Robin and Cody weren't interested in reality. They weren't interested in the children's emotional truth. They weren't interested in healing. They were interested in curation, control, and optics. The portrait wasn't the beginning of the eraser. It was the cinematic trailer for a much darker film. Because what followed was the move to Flagstaff, the CO rules, the complete family implosion, all consequences of a man who tried to rewrite the past so aggressively that the present collapsed. No matter how hard you try to delete a father, the void remains. And into that void, Cody poured ego, insecurity, and narcissism until it overflowed. And when the children grew old enough to think for themselves, the illusion cracked. This is where we start digging deeper. The allegations against David and the documents that don't match insider sources in Montana tell a different story from Robin's perfect victim narrative. Court records, police reports, and custody agreements don't line up with the tale she has repeated for 12 seasons. The villain edit was convenient. Too convenient. Perfect for TV. Perfect for Cody's hero complex. Perfect to justify a total legal takeover. But what if the story isn't true? What if David Jessup wasn't the villain, but the first casualty of Robin Brown's narrative machine? The ATV accident. The theory NO1 wants to touch here's where everything turns from suspicious to explosive.
Dayton's horrifique ATV accident.
The eye injury, the surgeries, the medical bills didn't just traumatize the family. The timing is alarming. Because guess who was supervising Dayton that day?
Cody.
And guess who was still legally responsible for Dayton at that time? David Jessup. If the biological father had shared custody and the child suffered a permanent injury under the stepfather's care, that could have triggered a massive negligence lawsuit, a child protective services investigation, a challenge to the show's filming environment, a complete collapse of the Brown family brand. The theory is this: the adoption was rushed through to shield Cody from legal liability, to get Dayton onto Cody's insurance, to close the loopholes before anyone could ask dangerous questions. And what did David receive? Silence. Quite possibly a gag order. Not because he was guilty, but because he was inconvenient. This makes the portrait more than creepy. It makes it evidence. The cover art for a settlement that protected the Browns and erased the Jessups. The purity speech, the emotional nuclear bomb. Then comes the purity locket scene. Robin sits on camera and tells her children that she gave her flower to the wrong man, that their very existence was the product of a mistake, that their father was her shame. Imagine hearing that as a child. Imagine what it does to your identity, your self-worth, your sense of belonging. This wasn't guidance. This wasn't healing. This wasn't mothering. This was indoctrination. A psychological cornerstone of the eraser. Teaching the children that their origin was shame so that Cody could be their salvation. Imagine being a child, barely old enough to understand the world, and hearing your own mother confess, on camera, that the relationship that created you was a mistake. Not a youthful error. Not a misguided choice. But a sin.
A regret.
A stain she wishes she could scrub out of her life. Now, imagine realizing that you are the living reminder of that regret. That is the foundation of trauma that Robin Brown built beneath her own children. When Robin tells them her purity speech, she isn't simply sharing heartbreak. She is rewriting their identity. She is placing a burden on their shoulders that no child should ever be forced to carry. In that moment, she doesn't just call her past a mistake, she implies they are half a mistake. She teaches them that the only way to be good, worthy, acceptable is to delete half of who they are. And then she introduces Cody. Suddenly, the story is no longer about their father. It is about their mother's purity, something she claims should have belonged to Cody all along. She inserts him into their origin story, like a missing puzzle piece that was never part of the picture. She tells them that spiritually they belong to him, not the man who actually brought them into this world. This is emotional triangulation dressed up in religious language. It is parental alienation cloaked in piety. And the effects are written all over Aurora's face. For seasons, we watched Aurora unravel under the weight of impossible expectations, panic attacks, overwhelming anxiety, hyperfawning behavior toward Cody. She leaps up the moment he enters the room. She clings to him. She cries when he is stressed. This isn't devotion. It's survival. Because deep down, she understood a devastating truth. In this family, love is conditional. Identity is conditional. Belonging is conditional. She watched her biological father get erased. She watched his name get painted over. She watched the past rewritten in charcoal and lies. And she knew, whether consciously or not, that if she displeased Cody, she could be erased too. Then comes the name change.
Not just the last name.
Dayton's first name.
He was born David.
Named after his father. A connection to the man who made him. And Cody couldn't stand it. Cody couldn't bear calling a child David, a reminder that he was the second husband, not the first. It threatened his fragile ego.
So he deleted the name.
He scrubbed the past. He branded the boy Dayton. I name you, therefore I own you. It was the final stamp of possession. A psychological collar disguised as parental love. But cracks always form in false structures. Today, insiders whisper that Dayton is resisting. That he is living in an RV, physically close but emotionally distant. That he may have reconnected with the Jessup family. And if that is true, it shatters everything Cody tried to build. Because you can paint over a wall. You can forge a signature. You can rewrite a caption. But you cannot erase blood. If Dayton looks back, if any of Robin's children look back, the entire Savior Cody narrative collapses. Because maybe Cody didn't rescue them from a monster. Maybe he kidnapped them from a father. And here comes the karmic twist worthy of Shakespeare. As Cody obsessed over becoming the father to Robin's children, he neglected the children he actually created. He accused David Jessup of being an absentee father, yet he, Cody Brown, missed Isabel's scoliosis surgery. He forgot Gabriel's birthday. He ignored Garrison's cries for help. He became the very thing he condemned. The portrait lie, the infamous charcoal sketch, wasn't a gift. It was a curse, a cursed object, a visual spell cast upon the family to declare a new hierarchy. Robin's kids are the real family. Everyone else is extra. And Christine and Janelle felt it. They saw their children erased in front of them. They saw decades of memories overwritten by a woman who arrived late to the story but insisted on starring in the opening chapter. The portrait wasn't nostalgia. It was a declaration of war. As time went on, the eraser only expanded. The enemies kept growing. First David Jessup, then the catfish, then Christine, then Janelle's sons, then the entire OG family, until finally, the world shrank to just Cody and Robin, living in a mansion filled with unsold jewelry, expensive art, and the ghosts of the people they erased. And now, insiders say the portrait has been moved, hidden. Maybe even Cody can't look at it anymore. Maybe the judgment in those drawn eyes, the eyes of children he abandoned in pursuit of a fantasy, became too much even for him. Because the portrait is his Dorian Gray painting. While he flexes his abs and dyes his hair, the portrait holds the truth of what he has become. But the ending of this story hasn't been written yet. Will Aurora and Brianna one day reach out to David? Will Dayton reclaim his birth name? Will the erased father return? Will the truth finally overpower the lie? We are watching. We are digging. We are tracking every document, every whisper, every post. Because one thing is clear, Cody and Robin can try to bury the past, but the truth always claws its way back to the surface. If Dayton stands beside his father again, even just once, the entire narrative collapses.
So stay tuned.
This investigation is far from over. And remember, the algorithm may try to bury the truth, just like Cody tried to bury his past. Don't let it. Share this video. Leave your thoughts. We read every single comment. The portrait lie is cracking. And when it finally shatters, the entire Sister Wives universe will never be the same again.